Welcome to Modi Briefing. Official allegation of India's link to Sikhs killing based on human and surveillance intelligence. The Toronto Star. New evidence has emerged suggesting that India may be involved in the killing of a Sikh Canadian in a Vancouver suburb in June. Intelligence sources have revealed that the allegation is based on human and surveillance intelligence, including signals intelligence involving Indian officials and diplomats in Canada. The intelligence was shared with Canada by a member of the Five Eyes Intelligence Sharing Alliance. The allegation has led to a severe deterioration in relations between Canada and India, with Trudeau suggesting there are credible allegations of Indian involvement in the assassination. In response, India has expelled a Canadian diplomat and stopped issuing visas to Canadian citizens. Canada has yet to provide any public evidence to support Trudeau's allegations, and it is unclear when such evidence might be forthcoming. As a result of India's actions, visa services in Canada have been suspended until further notice. The suspension of visa services is expected to have a significant impact on Canadian tourists visiting India, as Canada is one of the top sources of tourists to the country. Joe Biden raised issue of Canadian Sikh's death with India's Modi. Financial Times. U.S. President Joe Biden and other leaders from the Five Eyes Intelligence Sharing Network expressed concern to Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi about Canadian claims that India was involved in the murder of a Sikh activist in Canada. The leaders intervened at the G20 summit after Canada urged its allies to raise the case directly with Modi. The explosive claim, which New Delhi dismissed as absurd, has led to India stopping the issuing of visas to Canadian citizens and ordering Ottawa to reduce its diplomatic presence in the country. China, at UN, presents itself as a member of the Global South as alternative to a Western model. Associated Press. China has declared itself part of the Global South, aligning itself with the goals and challenges of less developed nations and offering an alternative to Western hegemony. The statement was made by Vice President Han Zheng at the United Nations General Assembly. China has positioned itself as a leader in the Global South for over a decade, particularly through its Belt and Road Initiative, which aims to drive Chinese development, infrastructure, and influence in other developing nations. The term Global South refers to nations that are less developed and less wealthy than First World nations. Canada has Indian diplomats' communications in bombshell murder probe, sources. CBC. The Canadian government has reportedly amassed intelligence from both human and signal sources in a months-long investigation into the death of Sikh activist Hardeep Singh Nijjar, whose assassination has led to strained relations with India. According to Canadian sources, some of the intelligence was provided by an unnamed ally in the Five Eyes Intelligence Alliance. The Canadian government has alleged that there is evidence to suggest Indian government involvement in Nijjar's assassination. The growing dispute has resulted in the expulsion of diplomats from both Canada and India. Politics Briefing, Ontario Premier Doug Ford says Greenbelt lands won't be developed after all. The Globe and Mail. Ontario Premier Doug Ford has reversed his decision to open parts of the Greenbelt to development, following widespread criticism and 2 ministerial resignations. Ford apologized for the mistake, stating, "Even if you do something for the right reasons, with the best of intentions, it can still be wrong." The Greenbelt is an environmentally protected area of land in Ontario, and Ford's decision to open up 3,000 hectares of it last year broke an earlier promise to leave the land untouched. Ford said he had acted after receiving feedback from members of his Progressive Conservative caucus. Ford's decision to open up the Greenbelt caused a political storm in Ontario, with 2 ministers resigning. The second, Khalid Rashid, resigned after his office admitted it had given incorrect information to the province's Integrity Commissioner during the Greenbelt investigation. The commissioner has now stated that there are insufficient grounds to investigate whether Ford breached ethics rules during his daughter's stag and doe party. Ford's decision to open up the Greenbelt was criticized by environmentalists and his political opponents, who accused him of breaking a key campaign promise. India suspends visa services for citizens of Canada. Justin Trudeau says he's not trying to cause problems. The Toronto Star. India has asked Canada to reduce its diplomatic staff and has stopped issuing visas to Canadian citizens, as tensions between the two countries escalate. The dispute began when Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau alleged that India may have been involved in the killing of a Canadian citizen in June 2021. Canada has yet to provide any evidence to support this allegation. In response, India has suspended visa services for Canadians and called for a reduction in Canadian diplomats in India. India also warned its citizens to be careful when traveling to Canada due to growing anti-India activities and politically condoned hate crimes. India has long criticized Canada for providing a safe haven for Sikh separatists, including the individual who was killed. While the two countries have had a strained relationship over this issue for years, they have maintained strong defense and trade ties and share strategic interests over China's global ambitions. India to reserve one-third of parliamentary seats for women. New York Times. Indian lawmakers have passed legislation reserving a third of all seats in the lower house of parliament and state legislatures for women. The rule will not apply to next year's national elections. The law must be approved by at least half of the country's 28 state legislatures, but passage in both houses of parliament virtually guarantees its implementation. Women make up 15% of lawmakers in parliament and just 10% in state legislatures. The move to increase women's representation has faced resistance. What price would India pay if involved in killing a Canadian citizen? Precious little. The Globe and Mail. It may be difficult for Ottawa to carry out a thorough investigation into the murder of Canadian Sikh activist Hardeep Singh Nijjar, as it is believed that India may have played a role. The relationship between the two countries is strained, and Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi has dismissed the allegations as absurd. There is unlikely to be a severe response from the Canadian government, as middle powers such as Canada depend on countries like India for trade and economic prosperity. The case of the two Michaels, Canadians imprisoned by China, shows that there are often no consequences for heinous actions committed by other countries. In chic Soho, a Hindu temple offers itself as a spiritual oasis. Associated Press. The Broome Street Ganesha Temple in New York City is seeking to attract a younger audience, as it aims to serve as a spiritual sanctuary for all New Yorkers, regardless of their religious background. The temple, which opened in 2001, aims to meet people where they are in their spiritual journey and provide a few minutes of peace amid the chaos of the city. The temple's assistant director, Shruti Brahmadisam, wants to attract more young people to the temple and has rebranded it to make it more appealing to the younger generation. The temple has an active following on TikTok and regularly hosts live streams on Instagram. Hinduism is facing a decline among young people who grew up adhering to their family's religious traditions, but many young people are still interested in spirituality and are constructing their faith by combining elements from a variety of religious and non-religious sources. The Broome Street Ganesha Temple hopes to provide a space for young people to explore Hinduism and spirituality in a relaxed and modern environment. India suspends visa services for citizens of Canada. Trudeau says he's not trying to cause problems. The Toronto Star. India has suspended all visa services for Canadians after Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said that India may have been involved in the killing of a Canadian citizen. Last week, Trudeau referred to credible allegations of Indian involvement in the assassination of a Sikh separatist leader on Canadian soil. The Indian government has denied the claim, calling it absurd. In response, India has halted visa services for Canadians and has called for a reduction in the number of Canadian diplomats in India. Canada has not yet provided any evidence of Indian involvement in the killing. Tensions between the two countries have been rising in recent years due to Canada's perceived support for Sikh separatist groups. The countries have maintained strong defense and trade ties, but a planned trade mission has now been cancelled, and a trade deal is on hold. Can India benefit from simultaneous elections? Deutsche Welle. The Indian government has set up a committee to explore the feasibility of holding simultaneous elections for the lower house of parliament and state assemblies, municipalities and village councils. The proposal has been criticized by opposition parties and political commentators, who argue that it would undermine the federal structure of the country and the autonomy of state governments. Supporters of the move argue that it would reduce the cost of elections and allow governments to focus on governance rather than campaigning. The committee is expected to assess the logistical requirements for holding simultaneous elections. Exclusive, Tesla proposes building battery storage factory in India. Sources. Reuters. Tesla has submitted a proposal to the Indian government to manufacture and sell its Powerwall battery storage systems in the country. Tesla has been in discussions with Indian officials about setting up a new electric vehicle factory in India to produce a car costing around $24,000. Tesla's Powerwall is a system that can store power from solar panels or the grid for use at night or during power outages. Although the Indian government has not offered Tesla incentives to set up a battery storage factory, it has suggested that subsidies could be offered to customers purchasing such products. The killing in Canada is not the diplomatic bombshell many think it is. SCMP opinion. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi met on the sidelines of the Group of 20, G20, summit in New Delhi, rather than for formal bilateral talks, due to a diplomatic spat between the two countries. The disagreement began when the Modi government scolded Ottawa for allowing Sikh activists in Canada to advocate for independence for the northwestern state of Punjab. Trudeau later claimed there was strong evidence implicating the Indian government in the killing of Sikh separatist leader Hardeep Singh Nijjar. The incident is likely to hinder Canada's efforts to expand trade and business with India. India suspends visa services for citizens of Canada and tells it to cut its diplomats. The Toronto Star. India has suspended visa services for Canadians and requested that Canada reduce its diplomatic staffing levels after Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau suggested that India may have been involved in the killing of a Canadian citizen. Tensions between the two countries have escalated since Trudeau made the allegations of Indian involvement in the assassination of a Sikh separatist leader. Canada has yet to provide any evidence of Indian involvement. India suspends visas for Canadians as rift over killing deepens. Wall Street Journal. India has suspended visas for Canadian nationals and Canada has adjusted its diplomatic presence in the country, following allegations by Prime Minister Justin Trudeau that India was potentially involved in the killing of a Sikh separatist in Canada. The two countries have each ejected a senior diplomat from the other country over the dispute, and Canada has halted talks on a trade agreement. India has called the accusation that it was involved in the killing absurd. India has also issued a travel advisory to its nationals in Canada warning of growing anti-India activities and politically condoned hate crimes. The rift between India and Canada comes after years in which both countries made serious efforts to get beyond the issue of Sikh separatism, which has long been prominent in Canada, home to the largest population of Sikhs outside India. Thank you for tuning in. The content above showcases the latest briefing reports and analytical synopses, thoughtfully curated by the 6Do team. These insights stem from a wide array of reputable media outlets, think tanks, government sources, and specialized experts worldwide. We encourage you to explore these sources for a comprehensive perspective. Keep in mind that while the content may not always align with the official standpoint of 6Do Brief, it's not meant to be taken as absolute directives for decision-making. Comprising seasoned media professionals, learned scholars, and accomplished scientists, the 6Do team embodies a trailblazing, fully independent media entity. To customize 6Do Brief to meet your professional needs, you have the option to subscribe to a diverse array of briefings on our website, 6dobrief.com. Regardless of your location, you can conveniently receive 6Do Brief via email.